My name is Li Xin. It's been 1 year and 13 days since I died. That's right, you didn't misheard that. 1 year ago, I was just an ordinary patient at a psychiatric hospital. Today, 1 year later, I stand under a grey and overcast sky, in a strange and unfathomable position. To call me a bloodthirsty enchantress wouldn't be undue. I was dressed in a floor-length blood-red dress that perfectly outlined my figure. The long skirt flowed past my ankles, red satin swaying every which way as I moved. My feet were adorned with a pair of 10 centimeters red heels, but still, I was able to run effortlessly under the night sky. Even without the wind, my enchanting, long, red curls would dance at my back. On nights like these, I often sped through the streets like an out-of-control cheetah. Sometimes, when I ran fast enough, all you could see was a red streak fly by. It had become a habit of mine to run fiercely through the night, this seemingly savage, and yet beautiful. I really wanted to escape this place, but I haven't been able to make sense of it all. After a year here, deep down, I've realized that I am no longer human. In fact, I might not fall into any species of creatures, not even the ones that existed in myths and stories. I've simply become a lonely, misty presence. Every time I thought of that, a trace of helplessness and sadness passed through me. This day, as on days before, I flew down the city streets. The scene from 1 year ago, when I first arrived to this place, played through my mind. 1 year ago, I was an ordinary third-year college student. If I had to name something that set me apart from others, it would be that I suffered from double identity disorder. Though my personality had always been a bit out of the ordinary, my mental disorder wasn't very serious. Sometimes I was a little peculiar, a bit obsessive-compulsive, or slightly more emotional than others, but those things didn't greatly affect my day-to-day life. But then, one day, the illness that I'd never minded much turned my world upside down, like an evildoer plotting away in the darkness. That day, for some reason, the second identity within me suddenly erupted. After completely taking control of me, I plunged a knife into the chest of a fourth-year student whom I'd been crushing on for many years. I don't remember the details of what happened before or after the incident. All I know is that, after the knife blade kissed his skin, I passed out. When I regained consciousness, I was already settled in on a bed at a psychiatric hospital. My doctor was a handsome, Chinese and American mixed-race man. His features were a bit more Chinese, with black hair and not entirely blue eyes, but there was a certain aura about him that made him stand out against other people. As I admired his appearance, he told me that I had personally killed my beloved senior. It was then that I understood the darkness of closing my eyes. I'd loved him so much, but because of a psychiatric disorder, I plunged a knife into his heart. When I started seizing, 2 well-endowed nurses held me down. The handsome doctor stuck a large needle into my slender pale arm, and that's where my recollection of reality stops. After that needle stabbed my skin, I quickly lost consciousness. Some unknown time later, when I finally woke up, I stood in this ghastly place that I'm now stuck in. I remember that when I woke up, I'd been standing in the middle of the city. I just suddenly woke up while standing there. This city doesn't seem to have blue skies. Instead, they're gray. There's also no sun, but the sky does appear to be lit by some unknown source. When I first opened my eyes, all I could see was that there were people walking to and fro on the street around me. The first figure to walk into my sights was an old man. He was a rather ordinary old man. As I stared at his head, my eyes slowly widened. A fear suddenly rushed into my heart. My fear stemmed from the fact that the top of his skull was missing. That's right, a piece of his skull was missing. and because the old man was shorter than me, I could see the squirming brain inside of his exposed skull. It was bloody too. I shrieked out, traveling from the bottom of my stomach to the top of my head. The sound morphed into a dolphin squeal, echoing throughout the street. Even I was alarmed by the sound. I felt my skull trembling, and I immediately had the impulse to reach up, to check if my head was still intact. My dolphin shriek was accompanied by another similar, but slightly deeper, shout. It was the old man. As his voice wasn't as high-pitched as mine, my scream nearly drowned his out. He seemed more startled.
Why are you screaming? I should be the one screaming here.
My whole body shook as I extended my hand. A trembling finger pointed at his head.
No, I just haven't seen a living person arrive in a long time, so I was a bit surprised. Young lady, don't be afraid.
The old man's eyes seemed to start leaking with what appeared to be tears as he looked at me pitifully. My lips twitched, and my entire body felt unwell. I truly didn't know how I should have interpreted his words, as my body trembled and my thoughts jumbled. I came to a sudden realization. In a panic, I raised my head and looked around at the passing figures, the people. I was immediately overcome with a disorienting feeling. The people around me could hardly be called people. They took on various shapes with various types of dress, some were in period garb, others in modern clothing. Someone looked like Superman, while others looked like groups of zombies. There were even creatures that looked like animal-human hybrids, and there were many other creatures that I could never have possibly imagined. Compared to those things, this groundless old man wasn't all that frightening. One might even call him a bit cute. As my mind conjured up the description, I looked back at the old man's open skull, and a nauseating feeling climbed up my throat. I was able to suppress the sudden nausea, but as I looked around at the unfathomable scene before me, I reacted as any normal person would have. I lifted my left hand and smacked my cheek. The crisp sound rang in my ears and I cried out, "Damn, that hurts." It wasn't a dream, I realized. But if it wasn't a dream, what did this scene before me mean? I stared blankly at the old man as my mind tried to decide whether to drop to the ground or not.
When one first arrives here, their body radiates light. We haven't seen a living person here in a long while, so when I first saw you glowing like that, I was startled. But don't be afraid, young lady. The guide will arrive soon to explain everything to you.
I must have been visibly upset, for the old man tried to comfort me. He extended his hand, and then I noticed that the top of his head had started to regenerate. By the time he finished speaking, he truly looked just like any ordinary old man, but that hadn't been comforting at all. Rather, I could only stand there frozen with a face of shock. The old man was about to continue speaking when a sphere of light appeared and started to envelop me. Oddly enough, the light gave me a sense of security in this unfamiliar place. I wondered which of the following was occurring. 1. I was about to be transported home. 2. I was about to wake up. Or 3. I may have just died, and now I was being resurrected. My imagination really was a testament to my intelligence. Regardless of the outcome, I couldn't help but laugh at the situation. Even the halo of light was so cliché. Then, one short second later, the scene around me changed. The glowing light around me, the street I stood on, the old man, and all the strange creatures disappeared. I seemed to be standing inside of a very large hall inside of a large building. The hall felt deserted, without a single thing in sight. It was very spacious, maybe several hundred square meters in area. The space above me looked to continue on endlessly, like the building had been completely hollowed out, and the space around me was empty, simply contained by 4 walls. I'd been standing not too far from the north wall, where a large screen hung, nearly covering the entire wall. The remaining walls were covered with shining white tiles. Even though I stood a ways away from them, the brightness still pained my eyes. I rubbed my eyes and then looked back at the screen in front of me. Suddenly, an image appeared on the screen, like a video was about to start broadcasting. It was a scene of a hospital room, shown from above. A girl laid in bed, her eyes closed. At her side sat a crying couple. My eyes widened, tears welling up in them. My vision was muddled, and before I could react, two figures appeared before me like a flash of light. When I looked carefully, I saw two people, two men. One of them was blonde-haired and blue-eyed and he looked mixed. I couldn't help recalling my doctor, but he'd a black hair. And not only was this man blonde, he had a pair of very blue eyes. His profile the only thing that felt a bit Chinese. As for the other person, when I turned to look at him, my tears had already cleared up. My eyes were drawn to him, and in that moment I forgot about all that I didn't understand about this situation. He looked about the same age as me, and he wore a black high-collared sweater that covered his neck, reaching up to his chin, and a pair of black jeans. His hands were tucked into his pant pockets. His hair was slightly long and black, with choppy bangs that swept over but didn't block his eyes. His eyes were dark, deep, apathetic, like two black holes. Faced with this boy who seemed to emanate darkness, I couldn't help stuttering some nonsense. "Are you a Grim Reaper?" The blonde man scoffed at the question. Then he shook his hand in front of my eyes.
"Hey, don't make a joke like you. He's just arrived here, from your world of the living."
"What? Our world of the living?" My lips twitched. What was that sentence supposed to mean? Before I could sort out my thoughts, my attention was pulled back to the large screen on the wall. The scene was the same as before, but the parents watching their daughter seemed to be crying harder now. Their bodies trembled and their eyes were filled with distress as they stared at the girl lying on the hospital bed. A strong stabbing sensation swept across my heart. I pointed to the screen and turned to the blonde man. "What's going on? Am I dead or what? How is it that I can see myself there? Who are you guys, and what is this place?" The blonde man slowly withdrew his playful smile and looked at me with a profound and serious expression. In a voice deeper than before, he said,
"I can explain it to you. I don't need for you to understand though. I'm just here to notify you, to let you know how to continue living here. No matter what suspicions you may have, please remember that I'm not here to lie to you."
I glared at him, but my eyes couldn't help glancing back to the image of my tearful parents. That's right, the girl lying on the bed on that screen was me, and the couple crying beside her were my parents. The blonde man shrugged, seemingly unbothered by my reaction.
"I'll explain it as plainly as I can. This is a space that has yet to be discovered by humankind, and its inhabitants are those who suffered from mind-splitting mental disorders, because these disorders produce increased brain waves, and under certain stimuli, these brain waves can increase tenfold. They may be captured by a soul splitter in the split zone, and then, your consciousness is brought here, to this space."
"What and what now?" I stared at him blankly and shook my head to express my inability to understand. His expression belied that this was a common reaction. He explained carefully to me again.
"Let's put it this way, when someone with a mental disorder is stimulated by something, their brain waves will greatly increase for a time. Your consciousness, your soul, if you will, can then be captured and brought here by the hosts of this space, a group called soul splitters. The one who captured your consciousness, to put it plainly, is like a bad guy who took your soul and dropped it into this world. Standing inside of this world right now is not your physical body, just your consciousness, your mind, and the sleeping girl you see on the screen is your true body in the real world, lying comatose inside of a psychiatric hospital. Do you understand?"
My expression was still wrinkled and blank as I tilted my head. I seemed to understand it, but what exactly are soul splitters? Why did they bring my consciousness here? Why do soul splitters exist here, and why do they bring people here?
Those are questions that I am unable to answer. My responsibility is simply to tell you that you've been brought here by the soul splitters. Those who have been brought to this space take on a form of their choosing while they live here, and their bodies remain in a coma in the real world. As long as your consciousness remains here, your physical body will never awake. and so we often say that the people who have just arrived have died.
The blonde man pointed to the screen, at my comatose body. His words meant that you're essentially dead, and that's why your soul has come here. In other words, I've become a vegetable in the real world? I looked at the screen, at myself, in astonishment.
You can think of it that way. However, doctors will not interpret it as a vegetative state, but rather cerebral death.
The blonde man nodded. How can I get back? I nearly shrieked out the question. The blonde man pointed to my chest.
Look at the key in front of your chest.
I looked down and discovered that there was now a golden key hanging from my neck.
It's called a splitting key. Everyone who arrives in the split zone will slowly form what's called a split symbol, and then this key will appear around their neck. As for the split symbol, take a look at him.
He pointed to the silent, black-clothed young man at his side. The boy slowly turned round, with his back to me. He pulled down the collar of his sweater, revealing the back of his neck. There was a crescent moon symbol that glowed faintly. The blonde man pointed his finger and made a circular motion around the crescent shape on the boy's skin.
This design is called a split symbol. Everyone in the split zone will form one within an hour of their arrival here. The symbols will be different for each person, and they can be located anywhere on the body. Once the symbol is formed, your body's characteristic glow will slowly fade, and you will become one of the people of this place. Since your split key has appeared, I expect that your split symbol will be complete soon. At that time, you will belong to this place.
My eyes widened, my mind not entirely comprehending the blonde man's words. The black-clothed boy slowly adjusted his collar, hiding away his split symbol. He turned back and looked at me with indifferent gaze, as if looking at me, but also as if looking past me. I couldn't help following his gaze. I turned around, but there was nothing there. At the other end of the hall, there seemed to be a door on the wall, but it was far away from us. When I turned back, the blonde man looked at me with a trace of something in his eyes. Sympathy perhaps, but it also looked like pity. As he looked at me, he sighed.
I know that the situation must be difficult to understand, but you have to remember, you're dead, and that's why you're here. You may feel that this is just a dream, but as the days pass, you'll slowly come to realize that it's all real.
Everything was very strange. It was too unbelievable, but his words caused me to fall into an abyss, dropping down and down and down. He paused a moment, and then he continued.
However, I'm also responsible for telling you that everyone who is brought here has a counterpart. That is, the soul splitter who captured you here. Each person's soul splitter is different, and the one who brought you here will have the same split symbol as you, located in the same place. Having been formed at the same time, you must try to find them.
Why should I find them? I couldn't help asking. The blonde man fixed his eyes on me and said,
When you find them, you can leave. To put it more directly, you'll be resurrected.
My eyes widened. That meant that there was a chance to go home? The blonde man immediately answered my question, as if he could read my thoughts.
When you find the soul splitter with the same split symbol as you, insert your splitting key into their symbol. Your consciousness will return to the world you came from.
What if I never find them?
Then your consciousness will forever remain here, and your parents will continue to watch over your brain-dead body, forever waiting for you to wake up.